Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we're going to talk about creating your own custom Space Marine chapter. I say custom, that's a weird word to use. Making your own thing. Not doing like Ultramarines or Salamanders or Imperial Fists or Crimson Fists or Black Templars or any of the others. Just stepping back and going, I want something that's totally unique, something that is absolutely mine, something that I have come up with, and this is kind of what I do to do that, because I just don't ever use actual Legion colours or existing chapter colours or anything like that. I always have to go with something different. Although I will say that for Chaos Space Marines I did have a big Iron Warriors army, but even that was mostly because Iron Warriors could take a Basilisk, which no one else could at the time, and that's badass because it was like a right siege line of Defilers and Basilisks. Awesome. But when it comes to Space Marines, right now 8th has dropped, the Dark Imperium box has dropped, which means a lot of people have got a lot of Primaris to paint, and there are a lot more Space Marine players I think than there were before, and even then Space Marine players made up the vast majority of people who played Warhammer 40k, as we know from the fact that Games Workshop won't stop releasing shit for them. So I've seen multiple people throughout the years, especially recently, asking how to go about creating a custom Space Marine chapter, how to make their own Space Marine chapter. I've even seen people express confusion as to whether you're even allowed to do it. Which, when I say that's sad to me, I don't mean in a mean way. I mean, that's one of the great things about playing 40k. You can kind of do whatever you like. They're your models, you bought them. And provided you're not doing something ridiculous like modelling for advantage and having everyone lying down so no one else can shoot them, or, I don't know, just taking one thing, sticking it on the table at a tournament and going, see, it looks like a Land Raider, but that's actually a Wraith Knight. Unless you're doing something stupid like that, you can do whatever you like, pretty much. You can come up with colour schemes, with names, with army themes. It's all down to you. It's all up to you as to what you want to do. So, firstly, if you want to make your own colour scheme, your own name, your own background for your Space Marines, you absolutely can. And if you want to do it for Primaris Marines, well, Primaris Marines can be fielded entirely by themselves. They don't have to be part of a larger Space Marines force. In fact, there are some chapters that are entirely made up of Primaris Space Marines. So, again, you can. How do you do it, though? Where do you start? What do you want to take into consideration? How deep do you want to go? Because there's several, I think, levels to this. I think it's best to put it that way. So, there's the surface level of, I want to make a Space Marine chapter that is my own. I like this colour scheme, I like this name, and that's it. And that's fine. If you want just like a surface level, this is the name of my guys, this is the colour scheme of my guys, and that's all you want to do, that's fine and that works. As long as you pick I believe with the new rules it's slightly different to what it was in the 7th, but you've got different chapter keywords and they've got different bonuses and stuff, or at least they will have when we get codexes proper. But you know, you can say that this is my chapter, their colour scheme is, I don't know, gold and purple. Maybe that's not a good idea since Emperor's Children were a bit gold and purple and they turned traitor. But let's say gold and purple. You want to call them the Imperium Sons. Terrible, don't do that. You could just leave it at that. You could say they are descended from the Ultramarines, they are a whatever founding chapter, 12th founding chapter, for instance, and that's it. That's all you need to do. But I like to go a bit deeper than that. I like to actually formulate a proper backstory, decide how they fight, why they fight, where they fight. I always like to think of who they answer to, or whether they refuse to answer to anybody. Kind of where their alignment is. Not to go full D&D with it, but for instance, my old Space Marine army, which I won't be painting my Primaris Marines in the same colour scheme because I fancy something a little bit different this time around. They are the Scar Lords. Now, I didn't actually come up with that name myself. That is a Games Workshop chapter that had no details. So there was the name, Scar Lords, and there was a tiny bit of lore, I believe, in the Tau Codex, saying that their warrior king was defeated, or at least was trapped in an experimental weapon during a battle with one of their heroes. And I was like, that's neat, that's cool. To me, the name Scar Lords kind of suggested a highly kind of ritualistic chapter, a bit like I think it's the Mortifactors, where they keep all the bones of their dead and stuff, and it's a bit off, it's a bit wrong. But I kind of felt like the Scarlords had that kind of ring to it, that they'd be very, very tribal, very barbarian-esque, a bit like Space Wolves, but not quite as wolfy, and not constantly using the word wolf to describe everything. And as a result, that is the chapter master of the Scarlords, as I've painted him anyway. So, got grey armour with, well, grey and bronze armour, with a cream helm, and that's pretty much it. But the way I did it was the armour is not uniform, so he's got like a sort of bronze leg there, whereas the other leg is grey. There are some Terminators in my Strike Force Ultra, which is what that army consists of, that have got 2 bronze legs, or they've got one half of them is bronze and the other half is grey, or they've got maybe 1 bronze arm and the rest of the armour is grey. It's not like a strictly uniform thing, because I felt that it kind of, the name suggested to me that they'd be a bit more individual in the way they decorated their armour. And I used that little bit of lore that Games Workshop gave as kind of almost like a starting point for the history that they have now. So the Games Workshop lore was, these are the Scarlords, we don't know what they look like, something just fell over, and they lost their warrior king. I took that to mean they lost their chapter master in the Damocles Crusade, and they decided, once their new chapter master was in place, he essentially took the chapter down a very dark and fairly dangerous road. He encouraged the tribal nature of the chapter, the sort of barbarian-esque nature of the chapter. He encouraged sort of the use of overwhelming force above all others, which is why they have more Terminator suits than they should have. They are absolutely happy to pillage them from other chapters in battle, leading to the fact that they are now distrusted by most other chapters that have heard of them, because they tend to lose equipment when these guys are around. They have no regard for the needs of other chapters. All they know is they want to, you know, they want to crush people with overwhelming power, and they will do anything they can to get the means to do that, which means up to and including taking other chapters' Terminator armour from the field of battle, repairing it themselves and giving it to their guys. And I also felt like the Scarlords, it kind of suggested melee orientated, you know, close combat, that sort of thing. So they are using the Carcharodon Astra rules from Forge World, so they just can't ally with people. It's just not on, they just can't do it. And yeah, that's kind of what I used for them. For kind of coming up with your own lore and stuff, it's kind of easier than you think. You sort of just need to consider a few things. I think before you even come up with colour scheme or name, you need to think to yourself, okay, is this a 100% goody two-shoes chapter? Are they all for the Emperor, all for the Imperium? They follow the Codex Astartes absolutely to the letter? If so, you know, where do they operate, or what do they prefer to do in terms of battle? Are we talking lots of troops on foot? Are we talking they prefer armoured assault? Stuff like that. You want to build up the character, I think, before you decide anything else. So you could, for instance, have a chapter that's, they fight for the Emperor, they fight for the Imperium, but they don't always respect the rules laid down by the Imperium. They don't respect the Codex Astartes. They might be descended, for instance, from the Dark Angels or the Blood Angels. They might not have any real regard for the Codex as laid down by Guilliman. They will essentially go to battle how they see fit. They are not going to follow the advice of some long dead Primarch. They've decided that the way they want to do things, for instance, could be that they're going to go 100% fast attack, in which case, I say 100%, but in which case you can use the rules in the Codex to make your own force that is primarily kind of assault based, bike based, for instance. Have them descended from the White Scars, that would fit that quite well. You might decide that you have a chapter that is a big fan of fortifications. You know, they're really good at digging trenches, at building walls, and so you'd suggest that they are descended from the Imperial Fists, but they might decide they're not going to use Centurion armour. So they have lots of heavy weapon squads, they have lots of tanks, they have lots of stuff that is, you know, properly entrenched in, but they don't use certain gear, and that can be used to basically reflect your preferences for models in real life. If you don't use Centurion armour, don't use Centurion armor, but you can always come up with a reason for the chapter not to use it in the game. So come up with their sort of alignment, their background. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they renegade? You can sort of get away with renegade chapters without them falling fully to chaos. You can have chapters that have been declared no one likes them. I can't remember how to pronounce that at all. You might have a chapter that has been essentially kicked out. They are not welcome by the Imperium anymore. They are essentially thought of as traitors, but they're not traitors. They might still fight for the Imperium, but the Imperium just doesn't know it. The Imperium has turned its back on them and declared them to be heretics, when in fact they're not. They might be fighting to reclaim their place among their brother Space Marine chapters. There's any number of things you can do, and once you've decided what sort of backstory you want for them, you can then move on to, well, let's say we go with say a disgraced chapter that found itself on the wrong side of a conflict. It's been punished by the Imperium, it's been declared traitor. They are known for their ability to strike fast into the heart of the enemy. You know, they have a focus on bikes, on drop pods, on jump packs. Now, for that, you could say, well, if I want more bikes, if I like the bikes, I could go for instance, you could go for White Scars, or you could go down the route of maybe a Raven Wing type army, so Dark Angels, but focusing on mobility and bikes. Once you've done that, you then think, okay, so how do you do colour scheme? What do you like the sound of? There's so many examples of colour schemes out there, and there's nothing wrong with taking an existing colour scheme and tweaking it. I see a lot of people kind of go, oh, well, I want to paint them this colour, but then I don't know whether that'll work, I don't know whether that'll be too close to a different chapter. There are nigh on 1,000 Space Marine chapters. There are only so many colours. There are only so many colours in the world, especially when you look at things like Blood Angels, for instance. Like 90% of the chapters that are descended from the Blood Angels have got red armour. It's not a big deal. You really can paint them however you want to paint them. You want to paint a chapter yellow, but instead of them being Imperial fist building fortifications, they are fast attack nutters who all like going on bikes and have a heavy jump pack focus when it comes to battle. You can absolutely do that. All you need to do is just tweak a little bit and make it your own. Maybe make the heads a different colour, maybe highlight a certain part of the armour in a different way. For instance, my Primaris Space Marine chapter is, I've already had this plan from before the Primaris stuff was available to put together. They are fairly close to being 100% loyal, but the nature of their work means that they are most likely corrupted in some fashion. So, as it stands, Primaris Space Marines are damn near perfect and don't get kind of affected by chaos anywhere near as much. That sounds boring to me. I don't like the idea of that. What I do like is the idea of a chapter that was founded specifically for the purpose of hunting down traitor Primaris Marines and executing them, which is what my chapter is. So I've yet to come up with a proper name, but I already know what they look like. So their armour is like a deep grey, basically black. They have one arm that is painted a different colour, which is most likely going to be like a deep crimson colour, and it'll probably be the right arm. And they will have different helmets. So I've ordered some different helmets from Forge World to make them stand out, to make them, I guess, close to being a bit heretical, because they're Night Lord's helmets, and that kind of plays into their lore as well. You know, they are built for not exactly stealth, but they can stealth when they need to, and they are about bringing fallen Primaris Marines to justice, essentially. So that was, you know, that's kind of what I did first. I was like, what would be a cool idea? What do I like the sound of? Okay, I like the sound of a chapter that hunts down fallen Primaris Marines. That sounds cool. How would they do that? Well, you wouldn't want like a brightly painted force. There should be an emphasis on kind of stealth and almost an emphasis on trying to instill fear. I know that doesn't work for Primaris Space Marines, but it's more a statement of intent. Having helmets that have got like skull and fangs on them, it's like more of a statement of intent than it is a desire to try and cause fear. And having one arm a different colour, I like the idea that it's showing, especially being the right arm, which is usually the trigger arm. It's almost like a display of penance. It's kind of, okay, we're going relatively stealthy, but there's this standout part of the armour which kind of suggests that something isn't quite right. There's something different. It's not standard heraldry. You don't see a lot of chapters that have like just one thing different. Deathwatch do it. Crimson Fists have like, well, Crimson Fists, funnily enough, but there aren't a huge number of official chapters anyway that have just one limb being a different colour to everything else. Kind of makes it stand out a little bit more. And that's kind of the way that I think is best to go. You need to work out that history, work out where they come from, what they do. Moving on from that, decide on a colour scheme. And you'll often find that by deciding who they are and what they do, that informs the colour scheme. You'll decide whether you want it dark, light, whether you want it to be stealthy, whether you want it to be kind of gaudy and, oh, look at me. From that point, you kind of need to decide on a name. That can be a little bit more tricky. There are plenty of name generators out there, but generally speaking, coming up with a name, again, comes a little bit easier. Once you've got the background, once you've got the colour scheme, coming up with a name tends to be relatively easy. He says, having not come up with a name for his own chapter yet. But as I say, there's plenty of name generators and stuff out there that you could use if you're feeling strapped for inspiration. You can also just look through the rulebook, look through old codexes and old rulebooks and stuff, and you'll find names of worlds, of systems, of other chapters. Maybe, you can even take chapters that currently exist or have existed, for instance. You could easily take the name of a chapter that at some point was destroyed and claim it as your own, because there are enough foundings that names got confused, colour schemes got confused. There are multiple chapters in the history of Warhammer 40,000 that had the same name or had the same colour scheme, simply because it's so vast and ridiculous that they just didn't know they were doing it. You always take that approach if you wanted to. Once you've decided on a name, take it a little bit further and actually name your main characters. So name a chapter master, name a few notable captains, for instance. If you want to go as far as naming every person in the army, you can do that. Personally, I don't, but you can. I tend to name notable characters. All it does really is build up a bigger sense of it being yours. Like, it's not even necessary. I wouldn't even say it's like 100% necessary. As I say, you can just go, this is the name, this is the colour, and that's it. But I think you get a greater sense of ownership from pouring more into it. You get a greater idea of this being your thing that you made. If you go that extra distance, and if you really make it not just your own chapter, but your own story, your own characters, you can extend it to a whole load of things. And it can dictate everything from the way your chapter fights and the way they look, to even the weapons they use. Maybe they've got a preference for plasma weaponry. Maybe they've got a big thing for chain axes instead of chain swords. It's all little stuff like that you might think at the time, oh, does this really matter? But at the end of the day, once you've got that finished army in front of you, you can just go, that's mine. That is 100% mine. And the chances of there being another one like this are very slim, because I sat down and worked out every detail. I mean, going back again to my Scar Lords, my Strike Force Ultra for my Scar Lords, that's the chapter master, as I say. I've got 20 Terminators back here that are done not exactly the same, but they've all been kit bashed and customised. I know that there isn't another Space Marine army out there that looks exactly like this. There might be others out there that use the same name, because after all, I did get it from a codex, but no one else's Scar Lord's army looks the same as my Scar Lord's army. No one else's Scar Lord's army has got the same backstory as my Scar Lord's army. And that's the thing that's satisfying. When you've got the whole force in front of you, and it's your own custom chapter, and you've come up with the name, you've come up with the colour scheme, you've come up with the background, maybe come up with a couple of notable points in their history, battles they've fought. You can insert them into larger narrative elements within 40k as well. So if there's a notable fight that consists of several Space Marine chapters, you can insert them in there. Because the whole point of Imperial Records at this point is that they're so shitty and just completely knackered that really anyone could have been there, and who's going to know? You can absolutely make your chapter relevant to different war zones and different events, and it's not a problem, because the Imperium doesn't know what the fuck's going on anyway. So you can easily do stuff like that to give them that extra history if you want to give them that. And yeah, I think that just about covers it. It's not complicated, but it's not simple either. The actual process of creating your own custom chapter from scratch, coming up with everything from backstory to colour to name to character names to notable events to the type of weapon they prefer, the type of tactics they prefer, all of that stuff, it's not complicated, but it is time consuming, and you might go through several revisions before you're happy with it. But I honestly think that having a chapter that you've made that has all of those details is far more satisfying than having a chapter that you've made that has no details. That's just how it is for me. I mean, it might not even play that big a part in your battles, but knowing that you've got that there, and knowing that if someone goes, oh hey, those guys look cool, what are they? And you can actually sit there and go, well, this is Chapter Master Carvex of the Scarlords. They are a very tribalistic, very xenophobic Space Marine chapter who don't get along well with others, and they focus on melee combat. Like, being able to just rattle that off and be like, yes, that is my thing, it's immensely satisfying, and it gives you a lot deeper connection, I feel, to your Space Marines. Because let's face it, Space Marines are fucking everywhere. There's loads of them. Everyone's got a goddamn Space Marine army. So making it yours is both not difficult and really difficult at the same time. Anyone can say, this is mine, this is what they're called, and that's it. Not everyone can actually sit there and create their very own thing from scratch, story and all. So being able to do that, it's fun, it's interesting, and it makes it 110% yours. So there you go. That's sort of just a very rambling sort of guide on how to create your own Space Marine chapter. Hopefully that all made sense, and get on it and let me know what you do, because I always like reading stuff like this. I like seeing other people put their ideas for chapters online, and that way I can steal them. No, I'm joking. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I will see you for the next one. There's like links and videos and Patreon stuff and all that crap all over the screen. Feel free to click one or all of them. That would be lovely. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching. Toodaloo.